Electric cars are here in a big way, and what I have next to me are two vehicles, very different vehicles, but both from the Volkswagen Group, the ID.4 and the Porsche Taycan Cross Turismo. And in this video, we're going to find out, what does the future of electrification mean for all-wheel drive systems? Are modern all-wheel drive systems good enough to get you through tough snow? We're going to put both of these vehicles on the TFL roller test, and we're also going to take them out into some rugged terrain to see how they do. Now, both of these cars have electric motors, and they both have two, one in the front and one in the back. Now, both of these cars use a less powerful front motor than rear motor, and I'm curious, can each motor individually get these vehicles unstuck in an icy or snowy or sandy situation? So what we're going to do is get various wheels stuck on purpose in rollers and then see if the other wheels on the ground can get us unstuck. First up, the front wheel slip test. We're going to get both of these cars stuck with the front wheels in the rollers. Now, both of these cars have several drive modes, and in order to make sure you guys are not stuck here watching this video for 19 hours, I'm going to put the ID.4 in the most aggressive drive mode, which is called traction. And then if we get stuck in traction, maybe we'll play around with the eco mode or the custom mode or the sport mode, but I think traction's gonna be the ticket for the best all-wheel drive performance. So, front wheels are stuck, we're nice and settled into drive. We're gonna go foot off the brake in 3, 2, 1. Gently onto the throttle, a little bit of slippage from the front end, and we glided right off the roller. So that tells me that the rear motor is engaged and ready to go from a standstill. Just like the Volkswagen, this Porsche is a dual motor setup, one in the front, one in the back. Let's see what happens in the front wheel slip test. I'm gonna put the drive mode in a gravel mode, which is kind of like their off-road mode, and if we get stuck in gravel mode, we'll try the other modes as well. So into reverse, onto the rollers, nice and slowly. Okay, into neutral, let the vehicle settle, into drive, just like the Volkswagen, foot off the brake, in 3, 2, 1, on the throttle. Okay, so just a little bit of slipping, but of course we were able to pull ourselves down with little difficulty. Welcome to Gold Hill, Colorado, and welcome to Lickskillet Road, a goofy name for a road, but this is actually the steepest county road here in the United States. It is incredibly steep. It becomes really dangerous in the winter. Of course, it is unpaved, and it's kind of legendary in these parts. And seriously, Google Lickskillet Road and you'll see just how steep it is, because obviously on camera, it's gonna look like a driveway. But I think this will be a good demonstration of one of the best parts of electric cars, their power delivery. So I am in park on this super steep dirt road, foot on the brake, let's go into drive. Now, in a gasoline vehicle, you have to transmit the engine's power to the wheels via a transmission of some kind. So that can either be a manual transmission where you're slipping a clutch, it can be a traditional automatic transmission with a torque converter, it can be a dual clutch setup where you're still slipping clutches, it could be a CVT system. But in an electric car, we really have a direct drive in this ID.4, and it's really well programmed. So if I go into drive, even on the steepest county road here in the US, take my foot off the brake, we creep, not slipping anything, we're not burning clutches, just a tiny bit of acceleration, and off we go. And if I give it some more, even at 7, 8, 9, 10,000 feet above sea level like we are here, the car is completely unaffected by the elevation, and we were able to accelerate up the hill with absolutely no difficulty and no wear on the drivetrain components. So same spot in the Porsche Taycan. Let's see how the all-electric Porsche tackles the steepest county road in America. All right, planted back in my seat. This is a seriously steep road. Let's see if the tires have the grip to get us going. I guess I'll just give it some beans in 3, 2, 1. Oh, wow! Even at, 10, 20 degrees of angle, God, this thing just hauls butt. So one of the cool things about an electric car too is regenerative braking, or as the Germans say, the recuperation. Basically what happens is when you descend down a hill or a grade, you basically add drag to the motors and use them as generators to put electricity back into the battery. Now the Volkswagen, for example, has two modes. There's D, which is small regen off throttle, and then there's B. And when you go into B, even on the steepest county road in America, it's holding me at 11 or 12 miles an hour. And you can see I'm putting electricity back into the battery and I'm not adding any heat to the friction brakes. Next up, the rear wheel slip test. We're gonna get both rear wheels stuck in the rollers and see if the front wheels, the front motor, has enough power to get us unstuck. Backing onto the rollers in the Volkswagen. Here we go. Put it in neutral, car's nice and settled. In traction mode, foot off the brake in 3, 2, 1, onto the throttle. Okay, so you can see quite a bit more slipping, but apply a little bit more throttle and we got off. So I would say if you were in a situation where the rear wheels were stuck, you would have to use a little bit more throttle than if the front wheels were stuck, but still plenty of oomph to get us off and where we need to go. See how the Taycan fares on the same test. Backing into the rollers, easier to modulate the Taycan, I find, than the Volkswagen for this kind of thing. If you're looking to drive on rollers, the Taycan is easier. Okay, zone gravel mode, foot off the brake, onto the throttle. Okay, a little bit of slipping, but we pulled ourselves off really easily. And there's a cool thing on the left side of the steering wheel. I actually have a little indicator that shows me when I'm engaging the front and the rear axles. Pretty cool. Obviously, both of these vehicles are running the wrong rubber for this kind of dirt or even snow off-road terrain. So the Volkswagen is running a set of Bridgestone Alenzas, just kind of a standard all season, on a 20-inch wheel. This is a really, really large wheel. And if you're going to do more adventuring, you definitely want to downsize that to something a little bit smaller so you can fit a wider sidewall. Now, the Porsche, on the other hand, is running a set of Michelin Pilot Sport 4s, which is, well, it's a performance tire and has no business being out here in the dirt. But interestingly enough, this particular Taycan is the adventure spec. And I say that because it has the smallest wheels available, a 19-inch wheel, smaller than the Volkswagens. This is the brand new Volkswagen ID.4 all-wheel drive Pro S. It is a small-ish crossover with room for your family, all-wheel drive, and about 8 inches of ground clearance. Now, this is a vehicle that obviously not going to go tackle Moab, but it's a vehicle that needs enough capability to get you through the roughest winters that Montana or Minnesota can throw at you, and it needs to have enough capability to get you and your family to the cool trailheads and campsites. Now, inside the Volkswagen ID.4, you'll find this large infotainment screen, and this is where we find the different drive modes. If I click the mode button, it's a haptic button, you can see several different drive modes, including Eco, Comfort, Sport, and the one we'll be using today, Traction. And if we go into the information, it shows you exactly how it sets up the vehicle. So suspension, all-wheel drive, maximum traction. Drivetrain, all-wheel drive, maximum traction. There's also a custom mode if you want to go through and configure your car specifically for various situations. You can have the drivetrain, for example, on Sport, with the suspension on Eco or Comfort. This is a ground-up platform for Volkswagen. It's an all-electric and an electric only. So there's no internal combustion counterpart to this car, and it really doesn't feel like any other Volkswagens on the market. The interior, the exterior design, the infotainment all feels very unique to the ID.4. From a powertrain and engineering standpoint, I think the ID.4 is pretty phenomenal. This is the all-wheel drive version. It launched in the US in rear-wheel drive only, and then since then they've added a 107 horsepower motor to the front, bringing total system output to nearly 300 horsepower, and it really zips along with a lot of confidence. Now, out here in the dirt, none of that really matters all that much because we're only going 5, 6, 7 miles an hour, but I will say the suspension tuning is incredible. We're looking at right around 8.2 inches of ground clearance, but it's really well damped. Pretty decent wheel articulation for a fully independent vehicle, and just enough ground clearance for me to be comfortable on these larger holes on this forest service road. The cool thing is because the torque is instant, you don't need a low range, you don't need to multiply that torque as you would with a conventional gasoline vehicle. I am a little bit worried, of course, about that large battery underneath. The car companies go through great deals to shield them to make sure they're protected, but there's always that concern that if I, hit a rock a little bit too hard, am I going to potentially create a bad situation where something could happen, not only to the car, but maybe to the entire forest. So that is definitely a concern of mine, but as long as you know the vehicle's capabilities, and as long as you're careful about the front end, because these still do have radiators for cooling, you don't want to go ahead and puncture one of those. You should be able to get where you need to go, as long as you take it slow. I think with a little bit of modification, this could be pretty cool. You could have a lot of fun with this car out in some mild, moderate, even medium off-road situations. Now the question everybody wants to know, what about the range? Well, ID.4, of course, well over 200 miles of range, and I think that range nowadays is super overrated, especially if you live in a place like Colorado where we have a really large built-out charging network. Now price-wise, you're looking at right around 51 grand for this spec'd out ID.4. Very well equipped, heated seats, heated steering wheel, dual zone automatic climate control, the big screen, the little screen in front of the gauge cluster here. So lots and lots of luxury features and pretty decent performance. I think, especially at altitude, this would easily outpace a Golf GTI. So next up, the diagonal slip test. This is one of my personal favorites. So in this test, the front right and the rear left are stuck in the rollers. The other two wheels are on the ground, and the traction control is going to have to engage to force power to the wheel with traction. Very common in the snow and the ice. Of course, no snow and ice, something even slipperier, rollers from a conveyor belt. Okay, here we go. So traction mode engaged into drive. Foot off the brake in 3, 2, 1, onto the throttle. Ooh, okay, it's thinking about it. All right, so it did take some spinning from the wheels that were stuck, but we were able to get off with little difficulty. So far, the Taycan is killing it, but now for the diagonal slip test. Into drive, foot off the brake in 3, 2, 1, on the throttle. A little bit of slipping. Oh, that was a good all-wheel drive system. Man, the traction control started flashing and it immediately forced power to the wheel with grip, and we came off like it was nothing. This is a Porsche Taycan, which is a road-hugging, autobahn-crushing, all-wheel drive electric sports car, except that this one is the Cross Turismo, which is not only a station wagon, but this one has about an inch more ground clearance than the standard Taycan. It also has a gravel mode and air suspension that goes up to nearly 8 inches of ground clearance. So even though, on the face of it, this looks like something that would be more suited for a racetrack, Porsche claims that this is a vehicle that can take you on some really cool, albeit mild adventures. The Porsche Taycan also has a series of drive modes, but it goes more in depth than the Volkswagen. So first of all, if we click the drive mode button, we've got Sport, obviously for performance driving, normal, range. That is going to optimize the car for the most possible distance driven on one charge, and then a gravel mode, which is unique to the Cross Turismo. That's going to raise the chassis and also set up the all-wheel drive system and traction control for driving on slippery gravel situations. But even cooler than that, if we look at the air suspension, we also have an additional setting called Lift, and that is going to increase the ground clearance of the vehicle to the maximum setting. You can also save it, like for example, if you have a really nasty driveway you're trying to get up, sure, will really confuse the next owner as to why their Taycan keeps lifting up on this off-road trail. Now I do admit it's weird taking a Porsche that looks like a legitimate UFO down an off-road trail, but I recently had the chance to take this exact car on a real Jeep trail with my buddy Calvin, who works for Porsche, and he spec'd it with real off-road tires, and you want to take a look at the video right now. All right, on two wheels in a Porsche Taycan. This is no longer a dirt road. Oh, hit something underneath a $100,000 Porsche. Yeah, it's pretty surprising what the Taycan will do, because obviously it was not intended to be a Jeep competitor in any stretch of the imagination, but that is the magic of the Cross Turismo. Now, service roads like this are pretty much all I'd want to take my $105,000 electric Taycan down, but it will do it. So the downsides of off-roading in a Porsche Taycan, obviously, it starts at 90 grand, this one's 105, and the sky is kind of the limit. You could buy a Turbo or a Turbo S and, you know, you're talking $200,000 worth of car. But if you get past that, you've got a limited approach angle. That is one of the drawbacks. This is an extremely long vehicle, and even in the lift height, which is about 8 inches of the ground clearance, it still has a pretty poor kind of breakover angle because of its length. But even still, You wouldn't take an M5 down this road. You wouldn't take an E63 station wagon down this road. It just would be unthinkable. But Porsche says you can do it in the Cross Turismo. We're still doing the same trails that this guy in this Mercedes Sprinter's doing, this four-wheel drive, and he's probably thinking, what the hell is that guy doing? What is he in for? But you stick this thing in the gravel mode, you put it on the lift height, and off you go. Now, I do have to say that this car is just a phenomenal piece of engineering. I've never been in a car that is this rigid, that is this planted on the road, that is, you know, just so off the wall good at being a car, and I genuinely mean that. I mean, the range isn't as good as something like a Tesla, for example, right? Even though this has over a 90 kilowatt hour battery, the EPA rating just isn't there. But in the real world, if it says you have 184 miles remaining, as it does right now, that is 184 miles uphill at like 85 miles an hour with a headwind. I really do think that Porsche is sandbagging the range a little bit on this car, and that's a super satisfying thing to see, because you know that, okay, if it's 100 miles to home and the car says I have 105 miles, probably going to get home. And I just absolutely love that. I was talking to my Porsche buddies and they were saying that this car has a huge amount of shielding over the battery. Not that they recommend perhaps doing something like this, but apparently it's ready to tackle road debris at least. So that's cool to hear, and hopefully we don't find out how strong that shielding is. Price wise, starts at about 90 grand, so certainly Model X pricing. I would get this over Model X all day long. It doesn't have the Falcon Wing doors and it doesn't sit as high, but it looks better. I think it's better made. The interior is just incredibly stunning, and it doesn't feel like the door is misaligned every time I open it. So I'm gonna call that a big win on the Porsche part. Okay, so this is the three-wheel slip test. Both front wheels stuck, only the right rear has traction. The other back one is stuck as well. So this is kind of the ultimate of the challenges for vehicles. See just how good that all-wheel drive system and traction control system are. Ooh, it's hard to modulate getting out of the rollers. But we figured it out, so make sure we're in traction mode, which we are. Into drive. Let's see if that right rear can get us unstuck. Off the brake, onto the throttle. Come on, car, come on, figure it out. Figure it out. Heavy on the throttle now. Oh, yes, we did it. I'm sure the rollers are smoking in fury because these are some heavy, heavy vehicles, but we were able to pull the ID.4 off. Okay, the first three-wheel slip test in the Porsche. Rear wheel on the ground. Come on, car. Nice and gentle. Okay, into neutral, into drive. Let's see what happens. Gravel mode, foot off the brake in 3, 2, 1. Gently on the throttle. Oh, Porsche does such a good all-wheel drive system. Incredible. One of the best results I've gotten out of any vehicle on a three-wheel test. What a machine, folks. What a machine. Okay, so the final and the hardest challenge is the three-wheeled slip test with only the front right on the ground, which is typically the non-dominant motor, the front motor, having to do all the work to pull the cars off. And then beyond that, come on, car, nice and gentle. The issue is if I give it too much throttle, we'll go launching off the other end. But beyond that, we also have to deal with the traction control, figuring out what's going on. So definitely gonna need traction mode in this case. Definitely gonna go into drive. And traction mode, just so you know, puts the suspension, the drivetrain, into all-wheel drive maximum traction. And that should be what we need. So here we go. In drive, foot off the brake in 3, 2, 1. Come on, Volkswagen. Come on. This is a really hard test, but I believe in you, buddy. Deep in the throttle now. Oh, nope, traction control is blinking. Let's try a different mode. Let's go ahead and try sport mode, see if that helps at all. Whoa, okay, so a lot more wheel spin. Oh. Interesting. Comfort mode. All right, so traction mode definitely felt the best. So the last thing I can do is I can try to put the ESC system into sport mode. Driving stability is limited. I've got a warning here. We'll go ahead and try that and see if that helps. And maybe Maybe we'll still, we're in traction mode with ESC disabled, or ESC in sport mode. We'll see what that does. Onto the throttle. Oh yeah, pretty much ESC, very much disabled there. But actually, you can see that that made the ID.4 worse because you want that traction control to intervene to brake the spinning wheel. So Alex, you want to give me a push? Ready? Yep, go for it. I need to be in drive. All right, now go. All right, good work, Alex. All right, cool. Oh, they are smoking good. Okay, well, you can clearly see that this roller has seen better days, so I think I better replace this one for the next run because it's smoking and it's pretty cooked. So actually, that was enough heat to completely collapse this one, so this one is kaput as well. And this one, woohoo! It's looking pretty toasty, isn't it? So these electric cars are so heavy that they're really, really hard on the rollers, and these rollers, the way they work is they work perfectly until they collapse altogether. As you can see, pretty much what has happened in this situation, it's just broken the weld off the end of it. So I'm gonna plop some new ones in before the next test, and I do lube them up between every test too, just to make sure that they are functioning as properly set up. And then this one is no longer gonna function as a roller. It's just gonna hang out here as a little support beam. So I do have to say at this point, I think the Porsche is doing slightly better than the Volkswagen in terms of its all-wheel drive programming and getting us unstuck. This gravel mode is pretty killer. Well, let's see how it does on the final test. Front right on the ground, everything else stuck. Let's see what happens on the throttle. Oh, we're sliding. Come on, figure it out. Okay, well, we got off. I think we probably slid and cheated a little bit. Let's see what happens. All right, I think it slid a little bit, so we're gonna try that one more time. When you've got such a wide set of rear tires, it's hard to keep them positioned in the middle of the rollers. We'll give it another go, so we've got a fair test on the Porsche. All right, take two, front right on the ground, everything else stuck. Reposition the car, perfectly even now, perfectly level. And here we go on the throttle in 3, 2, 1. Oh, we're running into the same issues. Let me try changing the mode away from gravel. What should we try? Sport mode? Let's see if that, no, don't do that. Sport mode is going to lower us and we're going to run out of ground clearance. Let's try normal. Off the brake, onto the throttle. Sending a lot of power to the front wheels. Come on, figure it out. Oh, it's so good. Now we are getting a little bit of side-to-side movement. I don't think we're catching on the sides of the rollers, but we are definitely getting off. And I see that all the power is going to the front, or a lot of it, so Porsche has done a killer job with this all-wheel drive system. What a cool test. This makes me very hopeful for these cars' performance in really bad environments such as ice, snow, sand, maybe a little bit of mud. Now, are these full-on rock crawlers? Of course not, but if you live in a place like here in Colorado or way up north, it's really important to know that the all-wheel drive system is good at transferring power where it needs to go, and I think the slip test does a good job of demonstrating that. Now, I have to say, in a lot of ways, these cars perform quicker and are faster to respond to bad situations than their gasoline equivalents. So very excited to see what the future of electrification holds, and big props to the Volkswagen Group for being one of the first and one of the best in terms of its calibration. As always, this has been Tommy with the Fast Lane Car and that bird chirping away. We'll see you guys next time on another episode of TFL.